Whenever you're ready.
Call the order. Just get up and start speaking.
Good afternoon. I'm Melody Carter, and I am Robert's niece, and happy to be here. And I told Greg I would like to make a few comments on behalf of the family and just share some memories with you. Whenever I planned to call Robert Allen, I needed to have at least an hour, as you know, because our conversations were invariably that long. And if I could call him today, he would say, "Well, hello, my favorite niece," to which I would reply, "Hello, my favorite uncle," because this has been our standard greeting for years. Of course, he was my only uncle, and I was his only niece. But I do know that if I'd had 100 uncles, he would have still been my favorite. I have so many fond memories of Robert Allen from my childhood and throughout my life. As you know, he could greatly embellish any situation or story, and he would literally lighten up a room when he walked in. As a child, my family celebrated Christmas a little differently from most on Christmas Eve. Our extended family would gather at my childhood home. It would be grandparents, great aunts, and uncles, and of course, my favorite uncle, Robert Allen. My parents thought it would be neat if all of the family could see my brother and me when we saw what Santa brought us. So they made special arrangements with Santa Claus to bring our gifts early. We would ride around town, and Santa always miraculously came to our house while we were out. And it was Robert Allen's job to drive us around town. He would invariably find a red light in the sky and thoroughly convince us that it was Rudolph leading the way to our house. Now, I'm sure the fact that we lived about 35 miles south of the Memphis airport might have had a little bit to do with it. I remember Sunday afternoons at my great-grandmother's house, Robert's grandmother's house, and it was out in the middle of nowhere, Mississippi, but all of our family would gather there on Sunday afternoons. And Robert Allen would be the leader as we tramped through the woods. We gathered eggs from the chicken coop. We drew water from the cistern. There was no running water, which also meant that there were slop jars and an outhouse. But each fall, we would go out and look for the persimmon trees. We would gather persimmons, eat them, and then cut the seeds to see if it was a knife, a fork, or a spoon inside. We would get so excited if we found a spoon because we knew that meant it was going to snow during the winter. But all of my friends thought I had absolutely the coolest uncle ever, and of course I agreed with them. I remember quite a few trips to Florence with my grandparents. We would come over to see productions at UNA, or at that time Florida State, or at Zodiac. And I even got to see the miracle worker at Ivy Green under his direction a couple of summers. I remember trail rides on horseback and many annual trips to the beach. One summer on a beach trip, I was actually grown and married at this time. We were at Seagrove Beach long before 38 was even a thing. We rented the same little beach house for a number of years, and it had a porch on the side that looked out onto an inlet that had marsh grass and stuff out there. One afternoon we were sitting there and we saw what appeared to be a rat run by. Well, Robert Allen announced to us that that was a codger rat. We asked what a codger rat was, and he proceeded to give a long, hysterical lecture on rats. When he was done and we were pretty well laughed out, he informed us that we had just had our first class in ratomology. And believe it or not, these classes continued every day for the duration of that trip. And I even have, this is true, a certificate much like a college diploma that says I graduated from the Seagrove School with a degree in radimology. Robert Allen loved life, as you all know. He enjoyed his beautiful home, his dogs, his horses, the flowers, the gardens. He loved nature, birds, and animals, and he had a particular fondness for elephants. He enjoyed being outdoors. He also loved his friends, and it means so much to see you here today gathered to celebrate a life well lived, and he would just be so pleased and honored to have all of you here. He loved the theater and the opportunities that it afforded him, and it's so fitting that this service is here on this stage. This is awesome, and thank you all for making that happen. Robert Allen loved his family, and we loved him. It's hard to believe that we'll not be able to see him again. I've got a stack, I was telling Greg a few minutes ago, a stack of old photographs that I found recently, and I was hoping that he could give me the background on who these people were. I can only imagine the stories he would have told. Fact or fiction, we never would have known, but he would have told me something about them. He was proud of his family, of his parents, his sister, his many cousins, aunts, and uncles. We had a rather large family at one time. He was proud of my two daughters who are here today, Courtney and Casey, their husbands and their children. And yes, they were his only great nieces too, so they were his favorite great nieces. He loved hearing stories about them and the antics of their children. Robert Allen also loved you, Greg. You brought him so much happiness, and for that we are forever, ever grateful, and we love you. So on behalf of the family, I would like to thank each of you for being here today and for being a bright star and bright spot in the life of my favorite uncle, Robert Allen Holder. Thank you.
Hello. First, I have a short thing to read from Suzanne Tidwell, who could not be with us today. She just started a new job in Rhode Island, so it was a little far away for her to come, but she did send this and asked me to read it. Let's see.
Sound check.
Is that better? Okay. She says, "My name is Suzanne, and I'm not with you today because I'm working a 2-show day of A Christmas Carol at Trinity Rep in Providence, Rhode Island. I have 7 staff members that work under me, another 40 or so co-workers, 25 cast, 15 crew, and 500 audience members. None of them knew Robert Allen Holder. But in every single way that I interact with them, every way I lead or coach my team, every time I radio, 'The house is yours,' to stage management, every patron I welcome into this sacred space we call home, they know him, because they know me, and my years working with Robert have informed everything that I am. And one day, when I am no longer here, my former colleagues will do things the way that I did them. They will remember things that I changed or improved. Audience members will remember phrases that I used or ways that I made them feel safe and accepted and warm. And they might be remembering me, but they are also remembering him. His legacy will become my legacy, and so it will go on. I loved him so. I will miss him dreadfully. Somewhere in time, we are always sitting in the dusty light booth at Zodiac, watching Julie Martin and Louis Fawcett sing, and Robert Allen Holder singing in my ear, 'You'll never get away from me,' and I never did." My name is Amanda Perry. I know most of you, not everybody, but most of you. I was one of his last UNA kids. I was there for the end of it, but I'd always heard about so much of what came before me. Gypsy, Godspell, Soar. Those titles were practically holy. They were part of theater history around here. So recent that I knew a lot of the people who were in them. Some of them are here today, even though I didn't see those shows. I remember thanking Julie Martin after she made a guest appearance to sing Rose's Turn in the Soar Show for finally giving me my own piece of Gypsy. That was Robert Allen's doing. He taught me and many others about theater history while creating it himself. He is all of our shared history, whether we know each other or not. He is the way we watch a show, or read a script, or plan a rehearsal schedule. One of my mantras in theater I learned from him: there's no such thing as an amateur, only unpaid professionals. Funny, I told him that once, and he didn't even remember saying it. I'm not sure he ever truly realized the impact he had on us all. Like children hoping to get their parents' attention, we all performed for him, hoping to make him laugh or cry or just give his approval. And he always watched and laughed and gave us all big bear hugs, whether we deserved it or not. He was always in your corner, cheering you on. He was one of the people I always wanted to share my accomplishments with, because he always made you feel like you were wonderful. He was a caring and empathetic teacher, even when faced with some of the most ridiculous things in class. Going off script. Sitting in on an acting class once when I was an undergrad here. It was a beginning acting class, and not everyone in that class was a theater major. Some of them took it just because I thought it would be an easy A. And two of the people who were not theater majors decided to perform a scene from A Doll's House. Okay, a classic. This was in about 1988, thereabouts. She had 80s hair, and she wore a short little black stretchy mini dress and her stiletto heels, and he had on something equally outrageous in 80s for A Doll's House. And he watched, and I was sitting in the row right behind him and down to the other end. And he started to cut his eyes over one time, and then he looked away. He just watched and nodded, and when it was over, he said, "I thought your costume choices were interesting. Why did you choose those?" And I said, "Well, it said it was in the 80s. To his credit, he kept his face straight. And he just said, "I believe that was written in the 1880s. Class is dismissed." And once they were gone, he just dropped his face in his hands. He couldn't believe it. It was one of the funniest things ever, because if he had ever looked over, I would have lost it. But he didn't. Like I said, to his credit, he didn't want to make them feel bad. Too bad. So he just sort of called them on it. He was passionate in his approach to theater and to life in general. There were all sorts of stories about the fits he would throw in rehearsal when it wasn't going well. Yeah, we've all seen those. Once you knew him well, though, you realized that a lot of that was for show and timed for the greatest effect. We were doing Lilies of the Field at the Ritz. And my mother-in-law was in it. I was in it. Julie was in it. I don't think anybody else here was in it. I'm not sure. And my mother-in-law always laughed and said, "You know that's just for show," because he had all of us intimidated. By this point, I had been around long enough that I was beginning to believe that. And there was one night, it was less than a week before opening, I believe, and people didn't know their lines, and there was one effect with a record player that just wasn't going right, and it wasn't that difficult, and he had one of his famous fits in rehearsal. And really, reamed everybody out, and just, he was so mad, and people were just, until he looked at my mother-in-law, Martha, and winked. And I saw it. And I went, oh, she was so right. It had a great effect, though. It was right the next night. Even though I didn't talk to him every week or even every month, when we did talk, it was for hours at a time. He had a wicked wit that would make you feel like he was sharing something with only you, and a belly laugh that shouted his love for life. Every conversation was as if we had spoken only the day before. I felt like he was a second father to me in many ways. He applauded my triumphs and sympathized with my failures. I told him that when he came to see me perform in the Glass Menagerie a couple of years ago, this one is important. And he came. This has been a time of great loss for so many. December is the 5th anniversary of my father's death. It has been 7 months since I lost my mom. Then the blow of losing Robert Allen 5 weeks ago. There have been other losses this year for me as well, and I'm sure for many of you. But losing Robert Allen, well, now I am well and truly orphaned. Love you, Greg. I forgot my next point. We'd like to open it up for anyone who would like to get up and share stories about Robert Allen or what he meant to you. The mic is open. Feel free. And I know you all have stories.
Hey y'all. I don't really need a mic, but here we go really quick. So, hi family. I'm originally from Elgin Crossroads, and I grew up poor. I had a 4-room house with an outhouse, and I grew up in the church right next door at the Methodist Church, and I played the piano, and I was a singer. And I used to talk like that all the whole time. And Robert Allen was one of my speech teachers too. And he helped me not talk like this because I wanted to be a TV star, and he said not many TV stars talk that way. So, 4 years of voice and diction gave me this little drawl, and it's worked. So here's the thing. This really is church, and he really is the pastor. But he's also an agriculture person because he knows how to spread manure around on all of us and help us grow, right? So back to the poor boy from Elgin Crossroads. Has everyone in this room been to Elgin Crossroads? If you blinked, you probably missed it. It's 1 mile square with 7 churches, praise Jesus. And this was in Elgin Crossroads. So when I got here, I came here on work study, and I was lucky enough to get to play for the SOAR program. But Robert Allen was like, what are you doing in the pit? I'm like, well, because I'm a piano player and I'm a singer. I've never done that stuff. He said, you should audition. You should be up here. I'm like, okay, next year I will. Okay, sure, why not? So I told this story to the niece, and here's the quick story. So I auditioned for SOAR. No piano player to kind of hide behind and none of that stuff. And lo and behold, Robert Allen picked me, and I got to do a little singing and dancing on stage. And from there, I did a lot of productions in this room, but we've all heard the story or the song, Wind Beneath My Wings, which is a great song, and it's very true. But some of us don't even know we have wings. You know, our lives are very different. Who knew you could have a career in show business? What? You know, who knows that that's even possible? But suddenly someone says something and you're like, what the hell is that? And then they get to blossom and they get to grow. And then someone else keeps going and they blow a little wind at you, and then you can flap them, and then you can fly. My cousin says pinch your thigh when you're about to cry, so I'm pinching. So because of Robert Allen, and it's his fault, I own an entertainment company and I get to do shows around the world. And up until COVID, every day of the year, someone in the world watched one of my shows. I was here for the SOAR reunion a few years ago, and I got to meet Greg. And Robert Allen was always full of love and sharing it in many different ways. And when you get to share your life with people that you love and who love us, I'm a lot like Robert Allen in that I'm a lot. And we need people in our life who love a lot and who don't just love us because of, but they love us in spite of. If you've got those people in your life, grab them, because we need to pray for them, because we are a lot. So Greg, God bless you. Thanks for loving him and us and giving unconditional love, because we need that even when we're too much. So for Robert Allen Holder, I thank you for my life. I thank you for helping a poor boy from Eldron Crossroads. Damn it. Know that life can be more than what you were born with, and that dreams do come true. So, and I'm sorry that it works out that I have to go, but now I'm flying in a different way back to do a show tomorrow. So, to his family and his friends, what a great man. Yes. We love you. Thank you.
There we go. All right.
Get a flip.
Hello. My name is Amy Flippo Montgomery, and I was very honored to be a student of Robert Allen's part of the time, and acted like I was a student of Robert Allen's the other part of the time. Somehow or another, I got into plays when I wasn't a student, but miraculously, I was able to take whatever drama lab or something like that the next year and got credits for that anyway. Amanda was talking about, well, first let me say, we were very proud and honored. Several of the ladies who lunch are here today, and we were very honored to have many of you over to my house about 10 years ago to celebrate Robert Allen's impact on all of our lives. And I look back on some of those photographs, and some of them are up here on the screen, and I'm so grateful that we had the opportunity to tell him how important he was to us, and how important he was to me. But he was something, indeed. And he was very funny, well, first of all of us were in love with him, regardless if whether we were male or female or whatever. We all were in love with Robert Allen. I thought he was the most handsome thing that I'd ever seen walk the earth. And so was in love with him the whole time I was a student, after I was a student, after I got married, after I had children, still in love with Robert Allen. I'd like to tell you a story that we did a play called Sugar, and Sean Wilhite and Alan Flowers. Sean and Alan directed that show, and Sean Wilhite starred in that show along with Edsel Holden and Robert Allen. And if you don't know it, it's the Some Like It Hot, the Marilyn Monroe and Tony Curtis, and that movie that was produced. So Robert Allen and Edsel were in drag half of the show. And we kept having rehearsals, and we was not very good. And we kept trying, and we were singing, and the set wasn't ready, and we were, Alan was beating us over the head and saying to me, when I was very nervous about singing, he said, "Oh, just sing, Amy. Whatever you do, don't stop singing." So, but anyway, Robert Allen was very frustrated. He was trying to walk around in heels and his hair and everything, and the set was not sanded yet. And he had to sit down on the edge of a bed, and it was plywood, and it was not sanded, and he was mad about it, madder than hell. So after the play was over with, I heard him talking to Alan Flowers, when is this set going to be sanded? You know, it's just pitiful. I have ripped 8 pairs of hose, and these eggs cost $9 a piece. Absolutely livid. And so Alan, very graciously and trying to keep Robert Allen under control, brought people in the next night to have the set properly sanded so he would not rip any more of his eggs. And anyway, he was a dear, dear, dear friend who I loved deeply. And I'm so pleased that he had Greg in his life. So pleased that I got the opportunity to meet Greg and be a part of his life too. And it's so nice to see his family here. And we thank you for giving us what is an immeasurable gift. Thank you.
So I suspect there are a lot of stories, so I'm going to keep mine really short. My name's Steve Richardson. I play a character that I created 1,000 years ago named Steve Trash. I teach children about recycling and the environment. Oh. Steve Trash is not bald. He wears a hat. He looks great. So, thank you. So my family moved here in 1977, and I didn't know anybody, and I immediately fell in with the summer theater crowd. Alan Flowers had this group of crazy people, and I met Robert Allen then, you know, wearing inappropriate garb for cabaret. And throughout my life, growing from a kid to a professional entertainer, Robert Allen played so many different roles, right? As I was growing up, I acted with him, I acted for him, I was taught by him. So the second I can get out of town, I get out of town and go to New York City. And I've always been a forward-looking person. Like I never look back, ever. I make mistakes, I just keep going. So throughout my career, I never really looked back very much at all. So a couple 3 years ago, Tanya had a party, and you guys came, and Robert and Alan and I are just talking at the bar. And we just grown up talking, and he grabs me, and he says, "I'm so proud of you." And that had such a huge, you could have pushed me over with a feather when he actually said that. That I had the approval of Robert Allen, who his temper tantrums might have been fake, but they were fake because he believed you could do better. And he believed that quality mattered on the stage and in life. It just mattered. So when he got mad and his eyes would bulge at you, that mattered. You did not want him mad at you because you wanted to close the gap between what you are and what you could have been. And I spent my whole career trying to do that. And the day that Robert Allen said, "I'm proud of you," man, you could have literally just tapped me over and I would have fallen down. So I'm glad he found someone to love. And man, he just poured the love out to many more people than this, and we are so grateful for that. That's it.
It'll be quick. It's on the approval spectrum. Thank you, Steve. I didn't know you were here. I haven't seen you in 5,000 years. Oh my God, you look
Since
great.
we were sleeping together.
I know, in New York. So we'll talk.
We were roommates.
Yeah, we'll talk. So my Robert Allen story is the reason why I want to tell it is because it is something that you carry all your life. Here we are, 50 years later? I don't know how many. But there was one time Karen was in it. Richard is here. He was in it. And Bubba Godsey was in it. I was a theater major, but a photography minor. And this was the time when videos were just coming out. And album covers were the 70s, and they were always so creative and so cool and all that. I wanted to be an album cover designer and photographer. So I get them in, and we had this color scheme, red and black and white, and it was a little risque. Karen was not. It was a little risque. I'm not telling it. But I'm telling something about Robert Allen. So I'm like, Robert Allen, I was never really good at the lighting. I was good at the composing stuff, but never good at the lighting. I'm like, come, just see. And Richard was doing and Bubba was doing these kiss tongues, the group kiss. And it was kind of crazy and stuff everywhere. It was really fun. But Robert Allen just walked out and go, I'm like, I know, it's terrible, right? He's like, no, you're a genius. So anytime I got into trouble, anytime I got fired from jobs, anytime everything was always wrong in my life, I always said, Robert Allen said I was a genius. Amen.
I have lots of Robert Allen stories. So I was a voice major in college. I was gonna sing. That's what I wanted to do, was sing. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna take a theater class. And so I wasn't really good in the beginning, but Robert Allen terrified me. He terrified me. His presence when he came in the room, he commanded the room when he came in, and you guys all know this. And all I knew is I had to please him. I had to do it right. Every single thing had to be right, and I worked so hard. And you know what's really wild is we all thought we were like Fame, the big show on television? We believed that. We believed that we were like that. So everything we lived and breathed, everything we did with him, whether it was community theater, Sugar, we had a blast with that, or Gypsy, I had to sing about a cow because I had to play a 14-year-old baby June. He saw that in me. I didn't see it in me. And, chorus line, Soar Show, everything we did, it was the best that we could be, and he made us better. And we would go to parties at his house, and we would have hours and hours of conversation about things, and not just the plays we were doing or the shows we were doing, but it was about life. And I went through a lot. I was going through a whole lot in my personal life and with my family. Robert Allen and I would spend hours on the phone sometimes, and I knew he had other things he had to do, but he always talked to me, and I'm sure everybody in here has a story like that. But the one thing I can tell you is that when I didn't believe in myself, and I put this on my Facebook page after I heard, is that he believed in me. And I guarantee every single one of y'all, he told you the same thing. You can do this. It's there. Take all that pain, take all that anger, and you make it into this. And so we would. We'd turn it into it. And we all became this family for many, many years, and everything that we did, like you were saying earlier, it was a part of us. What Suzanne said, that you might not have known him, but everything that we do, everybody gets to know him from that point on. I'm directing, I own a studio. I started a talent agency, which he told me I was crazy because I was gonna have to represent actors. He was right. I would call him and talk to him about any decision I was gonna make. And when I opened the studio and you guys started coming to the Christmas parties, and he loved every second, and he did the same thing that you said, Steve, to me. He pulled me aside and he got right in my face and he said, I am so proud of you and what you have done. Because there's a part of me thinking, I can do better. I know I can do better. I can still achieve more. But Robert Allen giving you that approval was something that I'll take with me forever. And I love everybody here, and we all have a connection, and we will forever. And Greg, he loved you with all of his heart. And I'm so proud that you were part of his life and that we got to know you as well. Loved him very much.
Hi, my name is Stefan Passmore, and I know several, but there are a lot of faces that I don't know. There are a lot of faces like Benji, I didn't even know that you were connected in any way, and I've known you for 25 years. Robert Allen was a force of nature, to be quite honest. In 1992, I was 18 and the hot shot of my high school theater class, and I came to UNA. My first acting class was his last. I was in that last class that he taught that spring. I never ever actually got to work with Robert Allen on a show, but there are benchmarks in our lives, moments that are defining moments that we carry forever. And sometimes those moments are people. Robert Allen was one of those benchmarks for me. In 1992 at 18, thinking that, I was going to be Denzel Washington. I came into college theater, and Robert Allen, the very first day of class, he wrote on the chalkboard, "Acting is reacting." And I didn't get it. No idea what it meant. A decade later, I told him, I said, it took me years to figure out what that meant. And he said, "Why didn't you just ask me?" I said, "There was no way. I was gonna let you know." But I did ultimately figure it out. But part of why I figured it out was because of the lasting impression that he made on me. And every time I saw him in all of the years after, I don't know why, but I always brought up the one moment I'll never forget happened in this building. This was my home for like 5 years. I lived in this building. And the first show I ever saw in here was his last here, Crucifer of Blood. And I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes nerd. I love Sherlock Holmes. And when they did auditions, I didn't try out. Because by that time, I'd had several of his classes under me, and I realized I wasn't the hotshot I thought I was, and I was really intimidated. I'd gotten to know a few of the other theater kids, and most of them older than me, and I was like, there's just no way. And I said, I love Sherlock Holmes as a character. It's one of my favorite characters ever. There's just no way they're gonna do non-traditional casting. There's just no way I would ever get that part. And if I didn't get that part, I would be devastated. But I came and I sat out there right on that side, and I watched the entire show mesmerized. And when it was over, I went downstairs to say hi to my friends who were in the cast. And Robert Allen was coming out of the green area downstairs, and he caught me in the stairwell, and he was like, "Hey, I'm glad you were here. Did you enjoy the show?" I said, "I loved it. I loved every minute of it." And I said, I'm so regretful that I didn't audition." And he said, "Why didn't you audition?" And I told him, I said, "Well, it's Sherlock Holmes. I knew that there was no way. Brian was amazing as Sherlock. There's no better choice, obviously, but I still would have really been just devastated because I knew that there was no way I would have gotten Sherlock Holmes." And I'll never forget, as long as I live, he looked at me with genuine wonder, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Why do you think you couldn't have played Sherlock Holmes?" Without ever actually saying a thing, he shattered my understanding not only of theater, but of my place in it. And my ability to echo what Tanya said, the idea that the only thing standing in your way is you. And that never happened again. I've done theater on a sliding scale of semi-professional for the last 30 years. And from that moment to this, I've never gotten in my own way again because of that moment. Seeking Robert Allen's approval, that's something I've heard over and over and over again. And one of my greatest regrets is that I never ever got to have that experience, but of working with him on stage. But he set the stage for my entire college career and all of my life since. The first time I ever saw Terry Pace was before Christopher of Blood, when he gave the lecture on Arthur Conan Doyle. And I knew that that guy was somebody I had to meet. Amanda will probably remember in that acting class when my friends, that group who I'm still friends with today, came to Robert Allen's class because one of them said, "You got to come see the new kid." And they became known to me as like the theater secret police, because they all sat in a row and they just, while I did my scene, and I'm like, who are these people? They're not in my class, they're there, and they've been my friends ever since. But they were all Robert Allen kids. My first cast party I ever went to was for a show I wasn't even in, at Robert Allen's house, where they all taught me how to watch a Rocky Horror Picture Show the correct way. So all that is to say that there's never been a day in my life, personally or professionally, on stage or off, that the shadow of Robert Allen and what he did for me in just a couple of moments hasn't resonated. He did the one thing that an 18-year-old kid needed a teacher to do. He challenged me. And he challenged me in a way that no other teacher ever did, and I only had him for one class. So thank you, Robert Allen. Thank you, all of you who shared him with us. And for all of you who are one of his kids, whether for a little bit of time or for a really long time, I love all of you.
Hey everybody, I'm Gary Jenkins. I just want to say that I never got invited to any parties at Robert Allen's house. I didn't realize there were parties. Apparently there were parties. Apparently they were awesome, and a lot of bonding and conversations about life occurred, but I wouldn't know now, would I? Because I was not invited, but I'm gonna let it go. You know, my story is sort of similar and a little different. You know, I grew up here, of course, Church of Christ boy. You know, my dad had a construction company, and I know a lot of you guys grew up around here. And back in the day, there was pretty narrow parameters for what were acceptable for young men to do. You could basically play football or fight, you know. And if you're like wanted to play music or do anything like that, it was like you were like a little sideways glance there. And I got throughout my whole life, quit showing out, you know. And I was just playing the guitar and singing. And all through high school, I wasn't in the high school band and finally my senior year, I did a couple of plays, and I was getting a little older, and I remember when the Source Show auditions came up, and this sounds so corny because, but it's just true. It's a different day now, but I remember sitting in the back of the room and all these people were auditioning, and I was so nervous, man. I was so scared. I just can't even tell you. And I'm sure it wasn't as bad as I imagined. But my brother was there with all his buddies, and I remember Jack Martin saying, "Is there anyone else that wants to audition?" And is there anyone else? And I went up there and I sang, and I can't even tell you how nervous I was. And I got to be in that show, and I was thrilled. And I just can't even begin to tell you. It was like, so much fun to be a part of that community and be a part of that show. And Pam Danley was in the show, and Eddie Buckley and Benji, and Pam was so wonderful, and all those kids were. And you got to realize I'd been doing nothing but like picking up trash on my dad's construction sites, like 110-degree weather and mowing grass, and I was just so thrilled. And Robert Allen, I think he let me be a part of the opening of the show, and the thing I think he did is just he saw that I had this thing that I wanted to do, and he just encouraged me, and he allowed me to be a part of that. And I had, basically decided I was just not going to pursue entertainment. But being in that Source show gave me the opportunity and the confidence to do that. And I was, you know, I respected him, but I was intimidated by him because he seemed so urbane. He seemed like he was from, you know, Manhattan. And I was so shocked when I realized he was from Mississippi. You know, I was like, wow, man. But I remember, you know, I think he just had a sense about kids. And, you know, I've thought a lot about this since he passed away. It's like thinking that, you know, he'd been doing this a long time by the time I was there. And he was not cynical or jaded, and he was just encouraging. And I think he knew that I was sort of at a fragile place, and he just encouraged me, and I felt, you know, very happy and excited to be a part of this. I did it for a couple of years, and I really got into it. And it's beginning, like someone was saying earlier, of one of those crossroads of your life, of sort of figuring out what you want to do and who you are. And it's so funny because, man, I really got into it, and I was playing music and stuff. And I remember one time they were having this, like somebody was saying earlier, they had like the regular kid theater class was in here, and I'd been in the theater class for a while. And Robert Allen, you know, asked me, he goes, man, since one of my theater veteran guys, I want you to do this scene from Equus. And yeah, if you know the play Equus, it's okay. I know we got young people here, so it's a play about a young man who loses his mind and rides horses unclothed, and it's just crazy. But I was so into it, man, that I came up with this whole deal, and I did this scene right there on the edge of that stage. Man, I committed 100%. You know, this kid is like just really losing it, you know, naked on the back of this horse. And and I often think about old Robert Allen making me do that. It's kind of funny, man. I didn't talk to him for like 20 years. I was like, man, I bet you were really having a ball. And I remember those kids in the audience just kind of staring and quietly. And then in the middle of the thing, the class broke and everybody left. And I guess I just was the campus weirdo from now on. But anyway, I'm going to wind it up. I'm sorry. I tell you, it was neat to connect with him 20 years later or so on Facebook and find out what a lover of animals he was in nature, and to get to know Greg a little bit. Greg, you remember we met back in 2017 when I was here. I'm just so grateful for Robert Allen, and I look back on my life, and I really just can't tell you, you know, how thankful I can remember him always being stylishly dressed. I remember me and my buddies would always see him. He was always working out. He was fit. He was funny. He was he knew so much about so many things, and I'm just grateful to know him. I'm super grateful for him in my life, and I'll tell you what I'm really grateful for is that I had the opportunity at the end of knowing him to tell him over and over again how much I loved him and how thankful I was for him. And I could just tell you it meant so much for me to hear him, to know that, you know, he loved me too, and he really appreciated us that let him know the impact he had on our lives. Last thing I'll say is driving down from Nashville today, and I was just thinking, man, you know, teaching and doing what Robert Allen did with his life, it impacts so many people's lives. And I just, man, I told him, I said, man, everyone you touch, like Doug has done so many shows, and I've been able to be in entertainment, which I'm so grateful for. Golly, man, for like almost 40 years. And I just, I feel like hopefully every time I do anything, you know, I'm bringing a part of Robert Allen to whatever I do. And I thank you for letting me speak. God bless y'all. Thank you so much.
No, I have not been drinking.
Hello, I'm Karen Gruber. Some of you in college knew me as Karen Donaldson. Well, I'm going to bring the room down a bit. Excuse me. This has been one of the craziest couple of weeks, couple of months, whatever, of my life. Some of what I want to say I've written, and some I will just sort of, kind of wing it, I guess. Sorry. We've lost so many unbelievably talented and generous people who inspired, taught, and entertained us. First, we lost Edsel Holden in 2019. Then in 2020, we lost Dr. Ed Jones and Pete Avalone, and now Robert Allen Holder last month. Even my mother died 2 weeks ago, exactly 3 weeks after Robert Allen. So all of my mentors are gone. What a deep, empty pit I have in my soul. Like many of you, probably, I feel sort of numb and in a fog. Robert Allen and my mom actually were big buddies. He would call her house for me when I lived with her, and they'd end up talking, of course, for an hour before I got to talk to him for hours. There were many nights when literally we talked all night long on the phone. The sun would come up before we hung up. But I'd like to think that when she heard he had gone on ahead of her, she kind of sped up her process, maybe, because she heard Robert Allen was holding auditions for dancers, and she did not want to be late. So I'd like to think that he reached down and pulled her up and directed her to the stage. She was a dancer. Many people have talked about what an influence Robert Allen had on their careers and the performance side of their lives. I'm peeing on this mic a lot, aren't I? I'm so sorry. Of course, he influenced me and mine. He pushed me and pushed me hard when I was doing a show of his. If he cast you, you better show up and show out. He would give every bit of his attention and his focus, and you better do the same thing. You better give him every breath your lungs could pump out. He was giving his time, and so you owed it to him. You owed it to him. He wanted you to have focus. One of the ways he taught us to do that was to be able to completely relax our bodies before a performance. Yes, I said relax our bodies before a performance. What is that? How can that even make sense? So what he did when we started rehearsals for the Source Show, I don't know if any of you remember, but he would make us come in and lie down on the cold tile floor. And through breathing, he taught us how to relax at will. And it took me a while, but then you got it, and you could do it anytime, anywhere. And I've kind of forgotten how to do that, and I would love it if I could have a, remedial class with him to do that. But he just wanted, he wanted, as you've all said, the very best out of us. He wanted us to clear our minds and just go to this place where we manufacture whatever it is that we individually put out. Some of you did great serious theater. Some of you sang, some of you danced, some of you did lighting sets. He wanted everybody to give it up. And after I'd learned what the Source Show was, I wanted it, and I wanted it bad. I don't know why, but I do know why. It was just something, the Source Show was just like prime time for me. I had no experience at anything like that. But I was like, wow, to sing and to dance in front of people, it seemed otherworldly. I just didn't think I could do that. But anyway, I was as green as they come, but I got a piece together to audition with for him, and I did my best. I gave it everything I had. He told us we'd be notified by mail if we had made it. Guess who stood by the mailbox every day for about a week, to see if I had made it, to open that letter and say, yeah, I want you, But it was right up my alley, and I was just over the moon. But anyway, it was just so much the thought of working alongside all of the people that I got to work alongside, because every one of you, regardless of what you had done or not done theater-wise or show-wise, to me, you were professionals because you were already here. You were ahead of me. So to get to work with him, he was an icon. He was an idol to me. And the show was so much fun. Oh my God. It was just, you wanted to come in. Uh-oh. Is that my signal to stop? What is that?
You're the VO.
Should I stop? Are we out of time? Okay. All right. What's that? Okay. So I'll try to stick to this and not venture off so much. Okay, so anyway, singing, dancing, learning from Robert Allen, doing exactly what I wanted to do. And my castmates, oh my goodness, they meant and still do mean the world to me. While we were working on and in that show, we were like a little family because we spent hours and hours together, and we wanted nothing more than to please Ra. Our name for him, R-A-H, Ra, we often called him. And we just wanted to please him. It was just a memorable, totally, I don't know. The experience for me was one of the most meaningful things in my life, to be in this college show, It was just huge. But for any of you who were in that particular source show, you'll get this. Every time I hear Christopher Cross sing Sailing, I get teary-eyed. It was the song that the band played that we lined up to before we made our entrance onto the stage. And I might as well have been going on stage on Broadway. It was just huge. It was huge. But probably most everyone in this room knows that feeling. You know exactly what that felt like, because not only was it going to be fun, again, you better be doing your best, because Robert Allen was up there. You couldn't see him, but he was up there, and he had a clipboard, and he's taking notes, and you'd hear about it later if you didn't make him happy. But so I met Robert Allen when he was my voice and diction and theater teacher here at UNA. We hit it off immediately and just had a connection. For one thing, I started college 5 years later than I really should have, 5 years after I graduated from high school. So I felt like this older, jaded woman, with all these 18-year-olds. I think I was probably 22 or 23, something like that. But we just had a connection. And it wasn't long before a bond was formed between us that never broke. Right away, we just got each other, and he became a dear friend as well as a teacher. I thought he was one of the funniest people I had ever come in contact with, so after class, we were each other's shadow and running buddies there after a while. Y'all know what I mean by running buddies, I hope? Up to no good, usually. Some of it involved some alcohol, that kind of thing, but anyway. Not much. In class, though, he would cut me down in a hurry if I was late or if I didn't measure up. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room who has been on the receiving end, as we've all heard already, of one of his explosions. His booming voice could put the fear of God and Satan in me. We were strictly business in the classroom, exactly as it should be. The friendship thing, we turned it off. The minute I walked in, I was a student. I was not his buddy. In fact, I do have to tell you this story, but I'm going to come over here. So anyway, I was in the Music Man, and we were getting our notes after that night's rehearsal, and we were all up here, and he's standing there with his little clipboard, under one arm, and that little cute butt stuck out there, blue jeans, and he's standing there, and he's telling everybody, what for, and blah, 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 blah. And so I thought, well, I'm going to sneak down to the restroom, and I'm going to pop right back up here. He'll never miss me.
So I come back up. He's standing, right out there a little bit, and I come back up and I tiptoe up behind him. And I thought, oh boy, this is not going to go well. This is not going to go well. And I tapped him on the shoulder. He keeps on. He ignores me. Tap him again, And he's not saying a word to me, doesn't even acknowledge that I'm even anywhere near him and I'm touching him. So I tapped him the third time. And he's, like this. And this is the only time I ever got him. You know how he would just kind of stamp his feet. What? What do you want? And I said, well, I didn't really want to cause a stampede or anything, but we can't hear you, honey. I didn't really want to, I'm whispering to him. Okay.
So I'm whispering in his ear and I'm saying, well, I didn't want to cause a stampede or anything, but I thought you might want to know. Some fool has hung a costume on one of the light bulbs on the makeup mirrors. It's on fire. It was on fire. I opened the restroom door down there, or the dressing room. I opened the door and smoke is billowing out, and I peeked around the corner and there's a costume hanging on a light bulb on fire. And so that was the only time I ever really got him. And he's still standing there, and he goes, well, thank you. I'll be right back. He takes off. But that was, he would just explode on you, and scare you to death. But that was one of the really funniest times. I just felt real big, and like I'd done something. His guidance and teaching pushed me directly to what I longed to be, a singer. He always acted, at least to me, that there was no doubt in his mind that I could do it. So I believed him, and then I did it. I sang, and I sang what I wanted to sing, which was the Great American Songbook, jazz standards, and I actually got paid to do it. I'd love to know how many of you he pushed right into doing what you want to do. He just pushed us all. And I never became famous, but I became fulfilled, and that is way, way better. Trust me. But back to this running buddies thing, I have to share what is to me a great story. It was around the time of the second Source show I did with Robert Allen. And speaking, I have to touch base with you for a minute. Speaking of making up those stories like the rat thing and all that, oh my goodness, I thought that was just mine. I thought he only did that for me. But anyway, we would sit outside at night for the breaks for our rehearsals. And John Blaylock, may he rest in peace. I know they're having a ball together. John Blaylock and Robert Allen and I would sit there usually together. And we made up this whole thing about the summer geese that were in the tree sitting out there. Now, I don't know if any of you know much about geese, but I've never heard of a summer goose before. But we had summer geese here at UNA. And so, these stories would just get made up and elaborated on and stretched and stretched and stretched. But anyway, around this time is when I met my future husband, Marvin. And he had been ahead of me at UNA, so he already knew Robert Allen pretty well. And he just sort of fell in with Robert Allen and I. And so then we were three. It wasn't just Robert Allen and I, it was the three of us. We went everywhere together. And so it wasn't too long before Marvin and I decided to get married, and Robert Allen gave his stamp of approval. The night before our wedding, my best girlfriend, Miss Shawn Wilhite, my trusty maid of honor, we met at Cajun's after work for just one. Sure, just one. On about number 2 or 3, in walks Robert Allen and Reed Robinson. So the course of the evening changed at that moment. And if any of you knew Reed, know Reed, how they fed off of each other, it was it was crazy. It was like living in a different world. But Anyway, so we sat there and enjoyed ourselves for, I don't know, hours and hours. But one of the four of us decided that wouldn't it be cool to go to a real party? Because after all, this is your bachelorette party. So I had Robert Allen, Reed Robinson, and Sean Wilhite at my bachelorette party at Cajun's. It was so classy. But anyway, we did get in the car and drove back across the river to North Florence to somebody's house who had. No, not yet. Not yet. That was later. So we were going into this party, and, I'm getting married the next day. And I wasn't walking very well at that point, and I fell into a ditch. And so Robert Allen and Reed picked me up and carried me into this party. Talk about making an entrance. But anyway. So I turned my ankle when I stepped in the ditch, and I had to limp down the aisle the next day. Then after that party, we went back to Robert Allen's house and partied some more. And meanwhile, my now husband, had been calling my mother's house all night long. Where is she? Well, she went out with Sean. And she called a little while ago, and and he's calling her again. Where is she? Is she home yet? Does she remember that we're getting married tomorrow? He was just kind of not okay with it, but we did get married, and he walked me down the aisle because, again, I was limping. Then after that, Marvin and I did what most married people do, and we became homebodies. We didn't party as much as we used to, and we had a daughter. So at least for then, our partying days were a thing of the past. And strangely enough, we lost touch with Robert Allen. I mean, really lost touch. No contact at all for years, as close as we'd been. And we never talked about it. I don't have a clue what it was about. I don't know. I just knew he was gone from my life, and I didn't get to see him anymore. And there was a big, a big emptiness. But I missed my wild partying running buddy, which brings to mind something interesting that Greg pointed out the day Robert Allen died. We were talking about all the people who knew him from different parts of his life, and how few of us probably overlap from, like we're the UNA people, and there were people who were before he came to UNA in his life, who did all kinds of different things. And then after he left here, we're talking about a life of 80 years. So there was a lot of stuff that went on that we were not a part of. We didn't know anything about. But knowing Robert Allen the way I did, I'm sure it was a larger than life. It had to be. I just wish I knew more about those years. So after this long absence from my world, I was finally reunited with Ra at the party that Amy mentioned. A group of women, all former students of his, planned a huge party in his honor for the sole purpose of allowing all of his devotees to worship at his altar, and actually got a commitment out of him that he would attend. Marvin and I were on the guest list. We showed up, and there he was, just like nothing, no time had passed. But it was just like this aura all around him. Just, he was just, there was this presence. There was just, oh my God. You're looking all through the crowd. Where is he? Oh my God, there he is. Marvin, there he is. Look, he's right there. It was, I was still starstruck, even though we were dear friends.
You were in love with him, like we all were.
Okay, I was in love with him. Good grief. All right, whatever. So, by this time, we talked all night, and we picked right up where we left off. And by this time, Greg was a part of his life, and we have a funny story about how Greg and I met, but I'm not even going to go into that. That was kind of crazy, but it was just like nothing had ever happened. And in the last several years, the four of us have been at the beach for a month together. We've done that for the last several years. Greg and I got to know each other better. You know, Robert Allen and I kept getting closer and closer and building back what we had missed all those years. And I got to know another side of Robert Allen that I'd never really had experienced. I always had it in my head that he was this partying, playboy, running buddy, you know. And what Greg had pointed out to me too was that he never knew the wild, partying Robert Allen. So we knew two different men. And over the last several years that we've been to the beach together, the month that we've spent, or weeks or whatever, were another brand new learning experience from Robert Allen Holder. I learned and got to know the sweet, compassionate, tender-hearted, dear, sweet side of him that I'd never even encountered. So I give Greg a lot of credit for pulling that side of him out. I don't know if I had just missed it or if he had become that. And I kind of think he became that. He could be one of the sweetest, most devoted friends you could ever ask for. And I love the old partying and yelling at me and scaring me to death part of Robert Allen. When I screwed up, he'd yell at me. But this new one was just so sweet and so compassionate. He had become even more of an enigma, more of just this huge presence. He just got bigger and bigger and bigger the longer he lived. He was kind of like a wizard in a way. I don't know, he just had this magic about him. But when we met again this year, just 8 weeks ago, it was a different trip to say the least. We only had about a week with him before he became very ill. And less than 2 weeks later, he was gone. He seemed a little melancholy every time we were together, but then I would push it out of my mind and not go there. He even remarked to me, to Marvin, to Greg, several times in 1 week, "I'm not going to be around much longer. I'm going to be gone soon." And I would say, "No, you're not going anywhere. Don't say that. Don't talk like that. You know, you're not going anywhere." But he kept sticking to it, and he would say, "Really, I know. So I'm sorry. The day that he collapsed was a Saturday. That was turnover day for all the rental units, so between about 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., the beach was almost deserted. It was wonderful, very peaceful and sunny, and the water was gorgeous. But he was quiet. Again, a sad feeling just came over me that I couldn't really explain, and we were kind of alone together, back and forth between the water and the tent that they had set up. And Marvin and Greg were in the water looking for shells, of course. We all had a thing for shells. But every few minutes I would look at him, and this feeling would just come over me like, don't blink, don't take a breath, don't look away. And I would try to push it away. Not long after that, Marvin and I walked back down the beach to our condo for lunch. And I just remember turning around a couple of times just to look back and see him sitting there, just looking out of the water. I only visited him once in the 2 weeks he was in the hospital. We had always generated such energy in each other's presence. We simply could not be around each other without laughing a lot and getting all hyped up. I just didn't dare go in there and get him all stirred up. Sorry. What if I got upset and cried? How would that make him feel if I got upset and cried? It would probably make him feel like, oh man, I must be in really bad shape if she's in here crying. And the truth was, he was in really bad shape. Greg didn't tell him I was coming, so when I walked in, he cried. I'll never, ever forget that. But I got to hold his hand, and we talked about happy things, and he did okay then. But who would ever think they would see Robert Allen Holder crying? He gave me so much. Experiences, opportunities, courage, confidence. I could go on and on, but I must say, the gift that he gave me that I love the most is Greg. He gave me a dear friend and another brother because Robert Allen was my brother. He's gone. So what do I do? What will we all do without Bra? Who's going to make up new words and stories and names for things with me? Who's going to talk ugly with me? Who's going to do sister talk with me? I wish I had some good news here, and I'm so sorry to be closing on such a sad, hysterical note, but here we are. But I wish I had some good news and some answers, but even though I'm living it, I can't imagine living life without Robert Allen Holder in it. I can still hear his voice. I can still hear him say something funny and I laugh. I can still see that fabulous smile, and I can still feel his great hugs. It's just not possible that I won't again, but I won't. At least not until I catch up with him again. I will be forever grateful that Marvin and I were in his presence in his final days, and that we were at his beloved seashore. This was just a small slice of my life with Robert Allen, and I do appreciate you indulging me to share it with you. And I'm sorry, I've been so emotional. I've been holding this in for however long. So, thank you.
I'm always anticlimactic my whole life because I don't see how I could possibly follow what she said. Robert Allen was such a shining star in all of our lives, young and old. I was 31 and hadn't lived here too long before I even dared to try out for my first play, and it was with Robert Allen. We did Chicago, and I remember so many things. I remember things about Gypsy. I remember Lilies of the Field. That was the last show we did here. And I'm so full of just unbelievable memories. I saw Robert as a friend. I knew him off the stage because shortly after we did Gypsy, I went through divorce. And there was a couple of times I'd be in the car and driving, and it took me right to Robert's house, and I would bare my soul to him, and he would have a few, he was so supportive. He didn't even have to say a whole lot. He just listened, and he loved. And there's nothing I can say to add to anything that anybody here today has shared, except he was just a shining, shining star in our lives. And we owe it to him to continue in the ways that he touched us to touch other people with the kind of love that he shared with us. And all I can say is, Robert, we love you and we're going to miss you. And I will always love you. I will always love you.
I have to put my glasses on. So, let's see. Don't worry, I only wrote 44 pages. So we'll be out of here soon. Okay. Good afternoon for those of you that I haven't met. I am Greg Smith. For the last 14 years, Robert Allen Holder was my constant companion, my partner, my joy, my inspiration, my love. And in the last 5 years, the state allowed him to be my husband. Before going any further, I want to thank Amanda for doing all the legwork to make this afternoon happen, and the university for allowing us to hold this event in this facility where Robert Allen spent many years creating magic. 25 years, a third of his life was here in Florence, and many hours in this building. It's only fitting that his life be celebrated in the place he loved with all of you who meant so much to him. We got married at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Montevallo, I hope I'm saying that right, Montevallo, Alabama. Robert Allen's friend, Greg Reese, a former Methodist minister, married us. When we got to Montevallo on our way to our annual beach trip, we were surprised to learn the local Episcopal Church had offered their sanctuary for the service, and were excited for us to add our name to their church registry. That same day, there was a clothing drive at the church, and 3 of the ladies running the drive heard about our ceremony and asked if they could attend. This gesture to want to bear witness to our union meant the world to us. For the first time in our lives, we had the freedom to be fully seen inside the walls of a church. We were accepted, our hearts were full of joy, all was right in the world that day. Standing here on the stage is both comforting and intimidating. I am not an actor. My theater background is that of a spectator. Speech was my most feared class, and I would get physically ill before class. It's a strange twist of fate that I married a speech professor. I imagine when it's my time to go, Robert Allen will be there welcoming me. But before letting me in, say, "Not so fast, let's first talk about that speech." I can see him doing that. It's true what they say, opposites attract. I am introverted, but that gave him the spotlight. I am shy at times, so it could lead the conversation. I am slow to get to know people, and he would know a person's life story within 15 minutes of meeting them. I danced like an old white man, so he danced alone. Somehow it worked. I'm a caretaker by nature. I'm a caretaker by nature, and believe me, he needed a lot of taking care of. He was full of random off-the-wall questions, and I was expected to answer those questions. Google was never his first choice. I tried to replace myself with Alexa, and I started him with using her for the grocery list. and that became an endless source of amusement for me. After adding an item, Alexa always asks, "Do you want to add anything else?" And anyone that knows Robert Allen knows there's no such thing as a yes/no response to a question, regardless of who or what asked it. He was compelled to explain things to Alexa. The grocery list was littered with random quotes. Not right now, screw you, stop, some not appropriate to repeat things, and just some bizarre random words that made me wonder what had caught his imagination or his attention at that time. He told me I made life fun for him, and he certainly did that for me. We shared a love for college football, tailgating at games both at Memphis and Clemson, my alma mater, and anything to do with the beach, as we've talked about here tonight. For many of you who knew him at UNA, he was the immensely talented mentor who inspired, demanded your best, gave you direction, and instilled confidence. He did that for me too. I knew him as a sweet, gentle man who loved to laugh and make others laugh, the funny uncle to his nieces and nephews, the devoted brother to his sister Betty, the ever-present friend, the loyal fraternity brother. He made me feel his love every day of our life together. He cared immensely for home, animals, the environment, politics, friends, and family. His theater life was in the past when I met him, and in the early years of our relationship, he didn't reveal much about that part of his life. It wasn't until the famous party that many of you attended at Amy's house in 2010 that I began to learn more about his life here in Florence and the immense impact he had on his students and the community. That party meant so much to him. It renewed his spirit. It reconnected him to his dear friends, and it connected me to all of you as well. All who were involved and attended, thank you. It was a big milestone in both our lives. And I was so proud of the Robert that was revealed to me that night. I met Robert Allen online. He was funny and very endearing. He quickly captured my imagination. At times, though, he would divert away from his normal charming character, and he crossed the line with his flirting. I was wary and cautious of online infatuation, so this other side of him made me question his sincerity. After a particularly disappointing conversation with him, saying all the wrong things, I declined his invitation to meet. It made me evaluate where things were going. I was entrenched in my life in Middle Tennessee on a ranch with horses, and he was in North Mississippi near his family. I had no intention of leaving my home, and I would not have asked or expected him to do that either. The obstacles and distance seemed too great. Angered by my turn down, he took that as a challenge I am forever thankful he accepted. It wasn't long after that I took a chance and I drove down to Mississippi. I walked up to the back door of his house and I could see him through the window vacuuming the hallway like a madman. I stopped and waited before knocking to give him a few minutes. I had called 10 minutes prior, letting him know I was close, so now he was in overdrive with that vacuum. I was soon to learn that procrastinating was a dominant character trait, and in the years to come, guests visiting our home in Tennessee were often greeted with a vacuum cleaner and an excuse. After retirement, he had refused to follow a schedule since his time for years had been regimented with taking classes, teaching classes, and late nights at the theater. He vowed never to be bound by a schedule again, and he wasn't. I've never known him to be on time for anything. Below the window of his back door was a bumper sticker that read, "Never wear panties to a party." I knocked and he rushed to the door, tripping over the vacuum cleaner. A bit tongue-tied, he rambled with chatter about all he had planned to do, but of course hadn't done. I was soon to learn that talking for Robert Allen would never be a problem. He could do it in his sleep. We were comfortable with each other immediately and had a great weekend getting to know each other. His house was filled with everything you could imagine. It was him. It reflected his personality and his life. Robert Allen grew up in the small town of Crenshaw, Mississippi, which consists of a small group of buildings and homes at the crossing of two highways on the edge of the Delta. He described his father as the go-to person in town when anyone needed assistance. Assistance was always given without question. His father was also named Robert, so his first and middle name was used. His father loved horses, and if he saw a horse he wanted, he would stop no matter where he was and buy it, even if not for sale. After his passing, Robert Allen had to rehome 70 horses. I have 8 to rehome if anybody needs horses. Robert's many stories painted a very colorful picture of his parents and his life in Crenshaw. He especially loved his grandmother, his mother's mother. She lived in a remote area on a farm and for much of her life had no running water and cooked on a wood stove. He spent his summers with her, loved her simple life and the connection with nature. Many afternoons were spent sitting on the front porch, shelling beans, learning life lessons. The remote location of our home in Tennessee brought back all those wonderful memories of his time with his precious grandmother. Robert Allen had an amazing life with many accomplishments. He was the president of his senior class at Crenshaw High School, voted best dancer, most dignified, most intelligent, and most likely to succeed. He and his friend Loretta, who could not be here today, have known each other since the first grade. They took dancing lessons together and kept in touch until his passing. In college, the accolades continued. He was the social coordinator for his fraternity, involved in many organizations, a cheerleader, and the vice president of his senior class at Memphis State. In 2009, we attended his high school reunion. Prior to the reunion, everyone was asked to write a short bio. His first submission was a blank page with "I lived" written across it. Evidently, that was not good enough for the committee, so he submitted the following revision. After graduating from CHS, I entered Memphis State University. For the first time in my life, I experienced something quite different from small-town Crenshaw. At first, I was intimidated, and that's definitely not me. My fraternity campus involvement and an occasional study session gave me focus and a sense of purpose. My enrollment in the pre-med discipline didn't work so well. You could think that all the chemistry that we took at Crenshaw High would have better prepared me. Yeah, right. Well, physics under Mr. B was a breeze. Remember, Loretta? What to do, what to do, what to do when I grow up. The burning question. Then the proverbial light clicked in my brain, for I had found the answer: theater. If you can't do it all in reality, you can certainly act the part on stage. Reaching people on an emotional level, whether they laugh or cry or just think, became my professional goal. Graduated in 5 years, the first year did not count. I immediately entered Ole Miss, and in the fall of '64 to begin my graduate work. After taking every available class, I landed a job at the University of North Alabama, where I taught theater until my retirement in 1992. One marriage, one divorce, and no children. Later, I returned to Mississippi by way of New York and wound my way back to Panola County. Sardis became my home in 1997. My sister Betty had asked that I come join her in a real estate business, and I accepted. The challenge was well worth it, and my new career as a real estate agent gave me insight into the real world. After the business was closed 5 years later, I retired for the second time. The time to travel and experience even more of life became my new goal, one of which I am still taking full advantage. My most recent adventure is becoming part owner in a horse ranch in Middle Tennessee, just south of Nashville. Most of my time is spent there now. The serenity and the beauty of the area makes for a great life. No matter where life leads, the memories of childhood and one's early school years will always be cherished. Many of life's important lessons can be traced back to this time. I am grateful to all of you for the role that you played in my life. Time may separate us, but memories will keep us close. Robert Allen's greatest gift to us was his kindness and loving spirit. He truly loved people. No matter where we were, no matter what we were doing, no matter how quickly we needed to be somewhere, he always took time to talk to those around him. It could be exasperating for me at times, given that I am task-oriented with limited free time. Opposites. Over time, I learned that there was no choice but to acquiesce because he would not have it any other way. And now in retrospect, I realized it was me that had my priorities backwards. Those connections he made filled his spirit and his heart. He wanted everyone to feel seen and heard. As much as it could be frustrating at times, it made me love him even more. The way he was able to touch people. He had the gift of gab like no other, and I always wished I could mirror those qualities. The world would definitely be a much better place if we could all be more like Robert Allen. He loved our puppies just as intensely. Unfortunately, they passed a few weeks prior to Robert Allen's passing, but I believe with all my heart they are with him. I brought their ashes with him to be beside him today. Recently, our neighbor lost his wife, and a poem was left anonymously for the family. Although his sister-in-law, Jane, who was here tonight, couldn't recall passing this poem along to Robert Allen, I found it on the kitchen counter when I got home from the beach after his passing. The poem is titled, When I Must Leave You. When I must leave you for a little while, please do not grieve and shed wild tears, and hug your sorrow to you through the years. But start out bravely with a gallant smile, and for my sake and in my name, live on and do all the things the same. Feed not your loneliness on empty days, but fill each waking hour in useful ways. Reach out your hand in comfort and in cheer, and I in turn will comfort you and hold you near. And never, never be afraid to die, for I am waiting for you in the sky. Robert Allen fulfilled his goals in theater and in life. He made us laugh, he made us cry, and he made us think. Thank you all for allowing me to share a little of his life story and our life together. Thank you for being here, and thank you for loving Robert Allen.